starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. So opening Historic Landmarks Commission, November 11th, 2020. So let's start with a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Heidi Rydell. I'll begin the roll call. Chair Grumbine.
Here.
Vice Chair House.
I'm here.
Commissioner Drury.
Here.
Commissioner Edmonds. Commissioner.
All right, here.
Thank you. Commissioner Lenve, absent. Commissioner Mahan.
Here.
Commissioner Uli.
Here.
Thank you so much.
All right, great. So now let's start with item A, public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within its jurisdiction that is not scheduled in this agenda. So if there's anyone that would like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, if you wish to speak on items not on the agenda today, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. That indicates to me that you wish to speak. And I do not see any raised hands at the moment. May I ask Heidi if she received any written correspondence, please?
Thank you, Ellen, and to the chair. No, we did not receive any general written correspondence for today's agenda.
And Mr. Chair, there are no more raised hands, so please back to you.
All right, great. So we'll go on to item B, approval of the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission, October 28th, 2020.
I move approval of the minutes.
All right. Motion by Uli,
Second.
second by Vice Chair House. All right, under discussion, any edits?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Mahan.
I had a couple of questions about words. On page 4 in the motion, item 6, it says consider corbels rather than scallops on the second floor gable. I think that scallops is probably not the right word to use. My recollection was that the drawing showed a molding. The gable was cantilevered out on a molding, not on scallops. That's my recollection, and I think so. That I think it should change to consider corbels rather than a molding on the second floor gable. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember that as well, but I think that your recollection is probably correct in that either way we're telling them to consider corbels. So I think swapping out molding for scallops, I think is a fine.
And one other item on page 5 in the motion, item 6 again, it says applicant should investigate catwalk requirements. You may use the word catwalk, but I really believe catwalk is not the right word to use on top of these panels. I think what we're referring to is security railings or security guardrails around the edge that would keep workers from falling off. A catwalk is a little narrow thing that is like a bridge, and it's not really the right word to describe what I think was meant. What would be guardrails, security guardrails around the entire installation.
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner House?
I would agree with that because I raised the concern that if there were catwalks for access for maintenance to the solar panels, would they require safety railings? So that is the main issue, is the safety railings. So that should be definitely reflected in the minutes.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay. Okay, any other edits? All right. And without Commissioner Lenvick here, I'm sure he would have added a few, but
The maker
all
of
right,
the
we'll
motion
let,
is- the maker of motion is fine with those edits.
okay, and the seconder.
Yep.
All right. So with that, let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Heidi Rydell. Begin the roll call vote. We'll start with Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Commissioner Drury,
Abstain?
Vice Chair House,
Yes.
Commissioner Mahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yes.
Chair Grumbine.
Yes.
That is unanimous with one abstention. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so now we are on to item C, approval of the consent calendar for November 11th, 2020.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar of November 11th.
Second.
All right. Motion by Uli, second by Vice Chair House. Ms. Plummer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item A, 24 Westview Terrace Street, received approval of review after final as submitted, and the consent agenda today was reviewed by Commissioner Mahan.
All right. So any discussion about the consent calendar? All right. Hearing none, let's go to a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin the roll call vote. We'll start with Commissioner Drury,
Aye.
Vice Chair House,
Turn my mic off. Yes.
Commissioner Mahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Chair Grumbine.
Yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so we are on to item D, announcements, requests by applicants for continuances and withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals. So, Ms. Hernandez?
I don't know if Pilar has any announcements as well. I just have one announcement that City Council did designate La Casa de la Raza yesterday afternoon, and it was a really beautiful and special designation. There were a lot of amazing comments similar to the ones that you heard in your hearing here. And that is my only announcement.
All right. Other announcements or discussion points? I did have one I did want to bring, actually two, but one is just wanted to kind of report back on the City Council subcommittee for State Street that is ongoing. And I attended that yesterday and made some comments on a couple of the things that they're discussing right now. And sort of the bigger overview picture that I conveyed was that that HLC is very interested in long-term thinking about the State Street and not just sort of zooming into one issue or the other, and actually thinking big picture about things as opposed to just sort of like dealing with the bike thing or dealing with parklet things or just particular issues. Instead, wanting to be holistic about our view of things. And so there were a couple items. One was the AIA presented a sort of a summary version of sort of a skim the surface version of their what's it called, design charrette, and the 16 teams that Vice Chair House and Commissioner Drury and myself each were able to review a bit of and give some feedback on some of the 8 different teams each that we looked through. And they're going to be going to City Council, I think in January is what it's looking like, to give a full presentation on it. This was just sort of a little snippet to the State Street subcommittee. So those were the sort of main things that were discussed. But yeah, so just wanted to report back to you all. And I just commented at the public comment section, and just as you know, as I was asked to, give some feedback. So and I think it was well received, and I think that this is really just going to be sort of specific, smaller issues, and then the subcommittee is going to then go to council with sort of summary topics, and hopefully at that point there will be a larger discussion about what to do, big picture with State Street, and figuring out things like bikes and whether you close things and not. Oh, actually, sorry, there was one more item. There was a survey that being done or about to be done actually, and that they're putting together all their questions on it, and about closing State Street or about bikes on State Street, about all these things. And so there's going to be a professional survey done on that. And my emphasis was that although it's interesting and important to know what the general public feels about those things, there's a bigger question of just thinking about the issues as a whole. And so it's good to have the survey, but that's just sort of a starting point and not a ending point of where how things need to get decided. So there's a long-winded summary of that meeting, but it was a lot shorter than the meeting itself. So and then the other thing I wanted to report was just something I saw that you all might have seen, and just to bring it up to your attention in case you're interested, or in case we want to discuss it further and give some recommendations. But the city released the design, or the initial design, for the new police station being done by the Canal Collective, and even though it's not in our purview, it's in ABR's purview, but it is close to EPV. But also, I thought it might be good for those of you who do have opinions, and it could be as personal or it could be as a discussion item, that we send some recommendations. But just in terms of reaction to it, and wanting to encourage, I'm guessing that many of you want to encourage it to be of the tradition of a lot of our public and civic buildings, which I think is really important, that it kind of shines as one of the main civic buildings of Santa Barbara, and has the potential to, because it's all new, ground up. So and ties to our a lot of our great traditions of our public buildings and civic buildings. So anyways, if you have thoughts on that, take a look at that, and then maybe we can agendize it for a discussion, and just some comments to be forwarded on to ABR of HLC's recommendations or thoughts. So,
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Commissioner Drury.
Can we formally agendize that? I'd love to see those plans.
Ms. Plummer, is there, in terms of agendas and that discussion of it?
It's not under your jurisdiction, so you could go to an ABR meeting and give your comments and put their public comment, but
yeah,
there's
that's what I was thinking,
nothing
but it
that
would be
bring
nice
it over
to.
here.
But
Yeah,
how do we see the
and
plan?
exactly. You can look
How do
on
we
the
see the
city's
plans?
website. They've released at least a perspective, and maybe there's more. But Ms. Plummer, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, Ms. Hernandez is correct. It's not in the HLC's jurisdiction. If you do want to review the plans, they are available under architectural drawings on the city's website. So that would be the method to view the plans.
Mr. Chair.
And then yes, Commissioner, sorry, which commissioner did I hear? Was that Commissioner
Well,
Drury
I
or
was gonna
Commissioner
ask
Vice
you
Mayor?
if it's been scheduled for an ABR hearing yet.
Yeah, that's a good question.
You can-
Do we know?
I think it has been there once for concept review, if I'm
I
not
usually
mistaken.
check out the ABR agendas, and I don't remember seeing that on an agenda. And I would think there would have been a news article about the comments.
I just
I
saw
will-
the city released a thing yesterday or day before
Yes.
about it. So
Right.
that's what brought it up.
I think it did go once, but I can double check that. Irma,
You
are you
just
on?
let us know
Irma, do
when you
you know if
find
it went
out.
to ABR?
Mr. Chair,
We'll find out for
Yes,
you.
Commissioner Mahan.
I think
Commissioner
we
May.
should, I think we should request to the ABR that we are given a courtesy review of it.
Absolutely.
We were given a courtesy review, I remember, of Roosevelt School. We were given a courtesy review of the junior high school. And we were given courtesy reviews of several other buildings in my career on HLC. And I think it would be appropriate at least to request that of ABR. And I'm sure that they would be happy to. It wouldn't be binding, but it would just be a courtesy review.
I agree.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner,
for that
oh,
matter,
sorry.
seemed to
We'll go
fall-
Commissioner House, and I think I saw Commissioner Uli's screen light up. I don't know if that was a question or not. So let's, Commissioner, Vice Chair House.
My recollection from last time I was on HLC and the new airport terminal was being proposed, a joint ABR HLC committee was formed to review that, or at least kind of, get it far enough along before it went to HLC for an approval. So, big civic buildings like that, I think there's a precedent for ABR collaborating with HLC.
Okay,
Mr.
thank you,
Chair,
Commissioner.
we're kind of
Oh, yeah.
getting into a
I'm sorry.
discussion at this point, and that's not on
Okay.
the agenda.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
so what I would suggest, Mr. Chair, is that I'll reach out to the case planner, Kathy Kennedy, for the police station, and then we can discuss if it's warranted for this to come before the HLC as a courtesy item. And, I'm happy to report back on it by the next meeting and see if it's something we could do as a discussion item. But I need to look into it a little bit more at this time.
Okay, thank you, please. And it seems like if they are open for it, I think obviously the HLC would be happy to do it. So,
Mr. Chair,
right,
Mike,
Commissioner Uli, did you wanna
I know we have to be careful about how much we talk about on a matter that's not on the agenda. But if Ms. Plummer's conclusion is the matter cannot be brought before HLC, we should at least be sent an email knowing when it's on the ABR agenda or some alternative way to review the material. I get those notifications and I didn't see anything.
okay, thank you. Ms. Plummer, I'm sure you'll be able to handle that whichever way
Yes,
it goes.
absolutely.
Keep us up to date. Great, thank you. All right. Any other announcements before we go on to subcommittee reports? All right. On to item E, subcommittee report.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Mahan.
just in passing, I would like to say that the awards committee has not met since the coronavirus came upon us, and we probably won't meet until it's over with, and the economy has been restored. So I just wanted to let the rest of the commission know that we are not meeting and probably will not meet for some time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that report. Any other subcommittee reports? All right. Then in that case, let's go on to the main event. The only item, item 1. So proposed amendments to the Historic Resources Ordinance, miscellaneous action item. This is a public hearing. This is a public hearing to review, comment, and recommend to City Council consideration of the draft Historic Resources Ordinance amendments incorporated into Title 30 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code as chapters 30.157, 30.57, 30.237, and sections 30.220.020 and 30.300.080H. The full revised Historic Resources Ordinance and memorandum detailing revisions, as well as public comment letters and previous drafts, can be found at the website. All right. So, Ms. Hernandez.
Thank you, commissioners, Mr. Chair and commissioners. So I'll just kind of outline some of the changes that were noted also in the memo, and then we can open it up for public comment and discussion and make sure that all the concerns are addressed. So let's go for the next slide. So the outline of the proposed ordinance did change pretty drastically in format to be incorporated into the chapters of Title 30. Hold on. And we are here to request recommendations from the HLC to the City Council. Next slide. So to maintain the consistency with the organization and formatting of Title 30, the Historic Resources Ordinance will be incorporated into the chapters as you noted, Commissioner, in the agenda, 30.157, 3057, 3237, and sections 32220 and 020 and 30300 080H. And I'll just outline what those mean. Next slide. So 3220.220 of the Division 4 of the zoning ordinance is administration permits. This is where the section would outline the powers and duties of the Historic Landmarks Commission. It adds the historic landmarks to the list of planning authorities, and as the HLC appeals to City Council in the section outside of this 3205.150. Next slide. Then we put the Historic Resources chapter on that outlines the procedures and criteria under chapter 3157 of Division 3. This is where all the city regulations live. This is where it describes how to regulate the designation, preservation, alteration, and demolition of historic resources, and also outlines the Mills Act contracts. Next slide. And then the section on existing or adopted overlay zones, historic district overlay zones, would go into the zone regulations. This is chapter 35.7 of Division 2. So the existing landmark district, which is El Pueblo Viejo, and historic districts, which are Brinkerhoff, the Riviera, and El Encanto, would be in this chapter, and it would include maps consistent with the zoning maps. Next slide. And these are samples of the maps that were created to go into the zoning ordinance. This is the El Pueblo Viejo Part 1. And the next slide, we can just go through these pretty quickly. Part 2, this is the upper part around the mission. Part 3, oh no, not Part 3, Brinkerhoff Historic District. Next. The Riviera Campus Historic District, next, and the El Encanto Historic District. So the maps are pretty precise. They're done by our GIS program, which was why in the ordinance they did take out the legal descriptions, because the maps will describe the boundaries. So the last chapter, besides the terms, is 30.237 of Division 4. This is how to add historic district overlay zones. So this sort of outlines the process and criteria for that section, how to create the overlay zone, and the design review standards for properties in the overlay zone. So that is separate from the existing ones. And once we add one, it'll be added to the section on the existing overlay zones. Next slide. This is with the definitions. We really wanted to keep them all together, even though they go into the section on general terms. We're going to put them under H of the Division 4 because they're specific to our chapters. Some that are the same as they are for all the rest of the zoning code, that we can reference that. But so many of the terms and definitions, we worked so hard to make sure they're just specific to our chapters over the past few months, and we wanted to retain that. So we'll keep them all together. And we'll note that they're just referencing this historic resources chapters and sections. Next slide. One of the big changes and it is under project compatibility, we revised the language from analysis, from calling them considerations to changing it to actual findings that you make. Based on the practice, we do treat them as findings currently, and it's nice to have this opportunity to actually make that official. And this will also occur in Title 2268, which pertains to the project compatibility analysis that the Architectural Board of Review does. Next slide. As we discussed at our last meeting when we discussed the ordinance about the buffer area around historic resources and districts, we want to clarify that they're for noticing purposes for compatibility with historic resources and not under HLC purview. This is an opportunity for us to make sure that we have an area that is identified around a historic district. We can let people know, including staff, the building counter, everybody, as well as applicants, know that there's a historic resource in the vicinity and that it needs to be designed compatible. This will help in early stages of planning so that they don't invest a lot in designing a project that really doesn't fit and really causes detriment to a district or resource. Next slide. The designation criteria, as also discussed, we discussed having the 4 criteria that mimic the National Register criteria and adding one that mimics criterion I of the existing ordinance as well. Next slide. And we did eliminate lots of references, almost all of them, to state or national laws and ordinances. And this was because if they change or are eliminated, we don't have to go and reopen our ordinance and change it, because then it would leave our ordinance weak. So for our ordinance to remain strong and not reliant on the references, especially to CEQA. So our ordinance will be strong even if some state law says that CEQA doesn't apply for whatever reason anymore. Next slide. We eliminated, there was a section that the people could appeal the listing of a historic resources inventory, but it was seeming really redundant because they can actually go and request a hearing to be removed off the list, or they can request a full hearing for a full designation. So there seems to be plenty of opportunity for them to come before you if they want to either be removed or fully designated. Next slide. There was a section in the last draft of the El Pueblo Viejo section that addressed how do we get buildings that are contributing to the district in significance listed. And we removed that because we'll identify them on the inventory or as contributing because they're already on the inventory. We'll all know that if they're on that inventory and they're in El Pueblo Viejo, they'll be noted as they contribute to the significance of the district. Next slide. The coastal zone, we will need to have a note in chapter 28 of the zoning code that notes that all these chapters are adopted by reference and will be incorporated into Title 28 for them to apply to the coastal zone. And that will require a local coastal planning amendment. But that way the historic resources are protected in the coastal zone as well. So that's why we have 2 chapters. Next slide. And the next steps. So it's our goal to get to Planning Commission so they can make findings to amend the zoning ordinance and the maps, hopefully on December 3rd. And then we'll continue on to City Council Ordinance Committee for review and comments, and then finally up to City Council for their review of the revised document. And I'm sure that we'll have public meetings for their adoption as well. Thank you. And that concludes my presentation, so we can.
Great, thank you. Okay. So with that, why don't we now go to public comment? Any member of the public wishing to comment on this item, please follow the instructions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those of you who are joining us by webinar and you wish to speak, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. And that indicates to me that you wish to speak. And yes, I would invite all the commissioners to, if you have a webcam available, to please turn it on during public comment. And I'm going to first call on Mary Louise Days. I've just unmuted you. If you could please unmute yourself. And I've also sent you an unmute request. There you go. It looks like your microphone's live. You have 2 minutes whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the changes that have been made very satisfactorily. I'm very concerned about the format the draft uses, scattering the preservation and design review sections all through the zoning ordinance. It is 2 titles now, the zoning ordinance, 28 and 30. 28 covers the coastal zone. Staff says there will be notice in Title 28 addressing this. A substantial part of El Pueblo Viejo Part 1 is in the coastal zone, plus designated structures are there. This needs clear coverage. When people request a copy of our historic resources ordinance, what will they be sent? A link to the zoning ordinance and a list of section numbers? I hate to think of the opportunities for staff error and public confusion with such a chopped up series of very important legislation. Santa Barbara was a pioneer in these fields. It could be a potential disaster. Regarding the impossible to read map of EPV Part 1, the comment was that staff had said that the map would be included with zoning maps, and people can type an address in their computers to see if a property is in EPV. We need to retain the legal meets and bounds description for safety and convenience. Santa Barbara deserves more. I also had asked earlier that EPV be put in the table of contents, and this was done in a previous draft. We must make it easier for people to look up the EPV regulations and descriptions. A separate ordinance would help cover that. If enforcement language is needed, then insert it or a reference to enforcement if that is what one of the factors that led to this strange scattering, preservation, and design review all through the zoning ordinance instead of the separate title that we have now. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I would just like, that was the last hand that was raised. Does anyone else wish to, okay, it looks like Pat Zaley. I've just unmuted you. It looks like your microphone is live. Pat Zaley, you have 2 minutes whenever you're ready, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the third draft of the HRO. I want to start with thanking you and your staff for listening to public comments and making many changes to the draft, including clarifying the public's role in appeals and defining the extent of buffers in neighborhoods. My first comment is somewhat editorial. I understand why the draft ordinance has been broken apart and placed in 4 different chapters in the zoning ordinance. However, I encourage you to reconsider that and put them back together in the new chapter 3157 with cross-references as appropriate. As a practical matter, think how hard it will be for future commissioners and staff members to grasp the big picture of what the HRO entails when they have to look all over the zoning ordinance. The document before you is likely the last time you'll see all aspects of the HRO together. My second comment relates to buffer zones around historic districts. I'm pleased that they're much more clearly defined, but I note on page 26, buffer areas around districts and resources are discussed, but there's no mention of how they'll be identified early in the process. This may be somewhat procedural and maybe doesn't belong in the ordinance, but it's very important. There have been projects where the buffer zone was not identified, and consequently, the project's review process was protracted and contentious. So thank you again for being so receptive to public comments on this extremely important and long overdue ordinance. Members of the public look forward to working with you and your staff. on establishing new historic districts and resources in this special city.
All right, thank you. And do we have
That
any
was,
more?
again, the last hand that was raised. I'd like to invite anyone else who wishes to speak to please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. In the meantime, may I ask Heidi if we received any written correspondence?
Thank you, Ellen, and to the chair. We did receive written correspondence for this item, and it was distributed to the commission prior to this hearing. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. And it looks like that was the last hand that was raised. So back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, so and now to the commission. So with, I guess back to the commission for questions, but in some ways this is the one agenda item. So in some ways it seems like going questions and comments is going to be is going to be a bad way of reviewing the document. So maybe we should and sort of give it a sort of this, because the recommendation is to send it on to the council. Maybe we should sort of get into the weeds on it and just work our way through it in the discussion, and perhaps we talk about big picture items, but also kind of just work our way through and discuss those points. Vice Chair House?
Mr. Chair. Yes, I would like to say something. I would very much appreciate it if we could give deference to the points made in the letter from Mary Louise Days, because we've had numerous meetings, and this may be the last chance we get at this, and there's been some frustration that comments made in letters have not been addressed by the commission. So it'd be good to make sure that we address everything of the comments that have been made by the public, which are greatly appreciated. So I could start going through that letter and just make some comments on that, or.
Well, why don't we do this? I was actually going to bring up a similar thing where I think Mary Louise Days is probably the most thorough in terms of point by point as well, and I think it'll be easy to work through. I was going to sort of maybe wrap it into a bigger thing where we just work through the document and make sure to bring up her questions along the way.
Sure.
And we just kind of take it chunk by chunk. But perhaps we want to have a bigger picture question discussion, because I think that there's getting into the weeds on things. There's also the bigger picture question about, before we get into the weeds, why are the weeds in 4 sections? and why not one pile of
because they're
weeds
easier to mow.
And yeah, and so maybe we have the big picture formatting question and discussion a little bit more first, or get into that and understand that, and then we kind of work our way through the weeds of the in order, bringing up Mary Lou's and then anyone else's questions along the way. I think that might be our most successful and most thorough way of kind of reviewing the whole document together without hopping around. Does that sound good to everyone?
I have some big picture comments.
Yeah. Okay. I think this might be it's an unusual way, but because it's such an important document and it's such a big document, it might be worth kind of taking it on the big picture paintbrush, and then get into the weeds on things after. Anyone have any disagreement or other response to that idea before we?
I think that makes a lot of sense. Go from macro to
specific.
And hopefully not have to go back and forth from big to little, just move in one direction.
Exactly. Okay, so if everyone's good for that, let's talk about the big picture first. And so that is the main one in my mind is the structures question, which Mary Louise Days brought up, and perhaps Ms. Hernandez, you and Ms. Plummer or others that from the staff side of things can help to explain why this way, and what would be sort of pros and cons of doing it differently, and what might be ways of mitigating the fact that it's broken up, sort of all those big picture ideas. First, what's the reasoning for breaking it? Yeah.
Could I make an observation first?
Sure. Yes, please.
It was frustrating for me and took some time to kind of get my head wrapped around this, but what would have really helped is if there was basically a table of contents of Title 30 that lists all the different chapters with these new chapters inserted in there so I could see the context, because I'm given the numbers of 4 or 5 new chapters, and I don't have any idea how they relate to the overall format of things. So I think for subsequent reviews at Planning Commission and City Council, it'd be very useful to give that table of contents with these new chapters inserted and highlighted, so you see how they fit into that framework. So, once I did that mentally, I had less of an issue with it, and I could understand it. The other point would be that, and I didn't get a chance to dive into it, but I believe our guidelines and other documents we have give kind of an overview picture. And obviously there are going to be references in our guidelines that are going to have to change now. And I think that a lot of people rely more on our guidelines than going into ordinance language, because that's the legalese of it. And so the guidelines really need to make clear, basically a summary of all of this, but where you can find the information. So that's what I have to say.
I would suggest in those guidelines, when they're revised, that up front within the first couple of pages, there's a table of authority, and the table of authority would reach back to the particular zoning code or other authority which those guidelines draw their basis.
Exactly.
I remember in our last time that we saw this matter, we talked about, or at least in my comments, I talked about how that former format had a lot of redundancy in it. It had a lot of redundancy in terms of enforcement if you fail to follow the ordinance. It had a lot of redundancy in how you make a designation, and it just kind of repeated itself many times. And I recall part of our discussion was to bring this format into the format of the general code. There is a separate chapter for definitions. There's a separate chapter for enforcement of the code should there be violations of the code. And so I think that this attempt in this version was not to duplicate those enforcement or definition chapters within this chapter. But I completely understand how confusing that is if you're trying to do that old high school game where there's a reference at the bottom of a page and it tells you to go to page 9 and then go to page 14 and then go to page 28, and you're following this bean trying to keep track of it all. It can be quite confusing. So my suggestion in this big picture would be to try and have chapter 157 as inclusive as possible of all of the things a person would need to understand with respect to historic structures and historic resources, rather. And where there might be specific language, reference that language in a section chapter reference, but not split it all over the place, so you've got to go assemble the pieces. From a legislative standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to keep all these things in their respective chapters so that you're not duplicating legislation from one place to the next, because that's just bad writing. So I suppose the compromise would be going forward, if City Council and Planning Commission and those who write legislation are intent on doing it in the version that we have in front of us, that HLC should turn its attention to its guidelines and make those guidelines as clear as possible, reaching back to the various chapters of the zoning code.
And I just wanted
All right,
to
thank you, Ms. Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Just wanted to offer up a suggestion that was just sent to me. Is we could have all these chapters put together for the public and for our review, maybe at the head of the guidelines or handouts, for ease and convenience for our use, but for the legislative part, they need to follow the zoning code, but we could have them all together at the beginning in a handout or something like that, so we can get a more concise read of it all together.
I think that would make sense.
Mm-hmm. That does seem reasonable. Okay, and so any more big picture comments and discussions? I think we're not. I don't think there's a conclusion on that yet, but I think that at least draws out a lot of the ideas. Is there any other big picture concerns or thoughts on this matter that might be ways of resolving, sort of being able to have our cake and eat it too?
Well, I just wanted to let you know, Danny Cato, the supervisor of the zoning department, and John Doimus from the city attorney's office are here. So if you have questions, they can help with those.
Oh, great.
As well.
Thank you. Commissioner Edmonds, did you have?
I did. And this maybe I think is water under the bridge at this point. But it would have helped me in the beginning. I too struggled, like Commissioner House mentioned, getting my arms around it really from the beginning. It would have made it easier for me and maybe other people if we could, as each version was put together, if we could have had a red line version that would have shown us, what was taken away, what was added in. So I realize we're beyond that point now, but maybe in the future for other documents, that's something.
It was all red. You could
Yeah,
only
that's what I figured.
I'm sorry, what?
That, just to be honest, it was all red. You couldn't. It was a
version. But in a legal document, if you've got a paragraph that's removing a sentence or you're moving something from one place to another, it will show you that. So it was hard for me to follow.
It was all read and lined and moved. I mean, it was unlegible. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, we removed, there were so many changes. It was all lines.
There would be more red than there would be black.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, all right.
And I think
to do it side by side, then
it's better red. It's better this way for sure. But I had the same thought, Mr. Edmonds, and I came to that conclusion that it was just it's been changed so much that it was that was why it wasn't done that way. But I didn't even ask, but that would have been
It's a horse.
It's been a good claim because exactly. I don't even know if it's a horse. But, beast. Okay, and I would say, and perhaps Mr. Cato or Ms. Doimus, or both, could also, I think this is a good appropriate time for them to talk a little bit more about it, for us to, for everyone to be fully understanding and kind of vetting this idea a little more. Just as a side comment, but I think this is an especially good example of it. I mean, during this time where we're doing everything virtually, it just makes things more difficult to try to have that more natural conversation about things and review documents. So with that being said, and understand where everyone's doing the best they can, they're actually doing, I think we're doing a good job of it and getting through it, but it's not the most natural or easy way of reviewing and discussing, especially documents wise. So I appreciate it, but it's also it's an extra big hurdle to get through this. So Mr. Cato, seeing you're on, could you give us some sort of your additional comments and thoughts and insights into this, and hearing what was been discussed and some of the potential ideas of summaries or any other way we might make this clear or get through the hurdles of making sure that in the future, both staff and the board and applicants and everyone is on the same page in terms of or understanding how it's all connected and what the whole intent of all the pieces of the document as they come together are.
Okay. Mr. Duong, is it okay?
Sorry,
if I-
that was an open-ended question. That was an open-ended question, but
Okay, let me just give you a little bit of background. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, all good.
So a little bit of background. As you know, the Historic Resources Ordinance now is in Title 22, right? 2222 is its chapter name. And it exists as all one big document, one big giant thing, right? And that's the way it's been for a very, very long time. And that's what we're all used to. When we first started these discussions, the way we had back and forth between we as planners and our brethren over at the city attorney's office about where should this thing go, right? We argued back and forth. Should it stay in Title 22? Should it go to Title 30? And city attorney's office decided that it needed to go in Title 30. So that was the first decision that was made. And then when we started looking at the proposed chapter 3157, that was essentially kind of chapter 2222 dropped into Title 30. It just didn't make any sense given the effort that we made with Title 30, the new zoning ordinance, to make it more readable and legible and better organized, right? The city spent $600,000 in 3 years, ending in 2017, to make it a better and more usable document. And that project was a wildly great success, right? Everyone who uses it, staff, the public, they love the way that it's organized because you can find things, right? Things are grouped together. Things are, they make sense the way that they work out. And then to have this dropped in as a kind of a standalone thing that has its own sections about zoning designations and process and all that, and definitions all in one place. Yeah, I mean, it helps for the people who are particularly interested in this, but it doesn't help in the overall organization, right? Definitions, we made it in Title 28. If you look around, there are definitions all over the place, right? Not every, but tons of chapters have their own definitions. You can't find anything. So we put them all into the back in chapter 3300. Right? And we want to continue with that. So people, if they're looking for a definition, they know where to look. They don't have to look in 5 or 2 even different places. Same thing with the process, right? Commissioner House, you made a great point about context, because without the context, it doesn't make any sense at all, right? I would urge that, I can't promise it, I'm not in charge, but I think that we should do that going forward, right? But, the Historic Landmarks Commission section 3220, that's just in line with what the council does, what the planning commission does, right? What the design boards do, what the staff hearing officer does. That's all in one place. So if you're looking for the planning authorities, who's the decision makers, that's all there. Right? If you're looking for a process of how to do something, how do we amend the zoning ordinance? How do we process a coastal development permit? How do we designate a landmark, right? That's all process stuff. That's in Title Division 4 of the zoning ordinance. And similarly, so that's the reason it fits in with this overall scheme of the zoning ordinance and how it works. Now, but like everybody has said here, the frustrations that have been raised by you guys and the public are that if someone's only interested in the breadth of all these items as far as historic everything goes, yeah, it's hard to look in the municipal code and say, oh yeah, you got to look here and here and here. I have no idea, but we can make handouts. Right? We have all kinds of handouts on our websites that help that are trying to help people find things. And we could just pull, it essentially be something like what you have as your attachment as the ordinance, right? These are all the things that are important for historic resources all in one place. There could be guidance in it as well about where to look for various different things, indices, it could be a little booklet, right? And it could be standalone. It could be part of the guidelines that Commissioner Uli had suggested. So there's lots of, and then, we're moving farther and farther away from paper documents, right? We're going more and more towards web-based things, interactive things. So this could be part of a web page where it's all there, right? I mean, it's just a link to here, a link to this section, a link to that section, a link to that section, all in one web page. So there's just tons of ways that we could make it more user-friendly for the end users and still maintain the beauty, I'm going to call it, of the organization of the new zoning ordinance. So that's my pitch, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Doimus, this is all your fault. Do you want to take a shot at it?
Sure.
He just threw you under the bus there. So.
No, it's fine.
No,
and to kind of go off what Mr. Kiddo said is agreed. We're looking at Title 30 being eventually our city's, zoning land use ordinance, right? So it makes sense to look forward. And so this is actually an attempt to be very progressive in terms of how we're moving by placing it and taking it from 22 to 30. And then when you do that, obviously, we do have a mention in 28, and the mention in 28 is everything, and we have reserved a spot in Title 28 to say everything incorporated in Title 30 applies to 28 in the coastal zone. Of course, we've got to go forward with the Coastal Commission to get approval on that. But the point I want to make is that in putting this in 30, there seems to be 4 natural breaks inside the ordinance that made at least sense. And I understand, a beast of an ordinance like this is, a very difficult thing to tackle on its own can be confusing, but there were 4 appropriate breaks, right? One appropriate break is the administrative section, and it talks about your commissions, and that's what that's for, and the Historic Landmark Commission and its powers and its jurisdictions and its rules, right? That's one natural break there. The second natural break would be historic resources in terms of identifying that, and then you have the third break being the overlay zones and so on. So that's how it's incorporated. Now, there always will be in any type of ordinance this size a natural cross-referencing, and that's just going to occur in any type of ordinance, even if it's concise. I'm working on the wireless ordinance, and there is a lot of, or the off-sale alcohol ordinance, right? No matter what, you're going to have cross-referencing to other areas in the code. But at least in terms of how it's formatted, if you're going to put it in 30 to make that, you want to make it fit the mechanics of Title 30, and then within there, where are the natural breaks of where it belongs? The powers of the HLC don't necessarily need to be intertwined with historic resources and so on. So that's just my brief synopsis of where or why the decisions were made.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions or discussion that you want to have with, now that you've heard the behind the scenes reasons for why it went this way?
Let's start over.
And
no, I think legislatively it makes sense. You want to have a code that is well managed, well organized, and can be defended from a legal standpoint, and having it disjointed hampers that effort. So legislatively, I get it. That doesn't necessarily aid and support good public input when it comes to projects that then have to kind of fit in that wrapper. And I think that's where our interpretive guidelines and the rest of our support documents that come out of this effort need to be more user-friendly, and we won't have, no disrespect to the city attorney, but we won't have him write the guidelines. We'll have him just write that guideline.
The cheat sheet, yeah.
No disrespecting.
Other commissioners want to discuss or weigh in with Mr. Chair, Mr. Duenas. And actually, sorry, I'm going to have to, I'm going to turn off my camera for a second, but I just realized my battery's running low, but I'll be staying on my phone. So I'll be back in visual in a minute, but for now, my camera will be off. So, go ahead, continue, Commissioner Drury.
Mr. Chair, yeah. So how does the presentation by Mr. Cato and the comments by Commissioner Uli, do they line up at all with the comments of the two public speakers, the comments by Mary Louise Days and Ms. Staley? Or are they arguing for a different organization of the documents? I guess anybody could answer that. If they,
and I can take a shot at it, but I think what they're saying is, and jump in if I'm wrong, but what they're saying is the organization of it was done this way for the reasons of making more sense in one way. That's the pros, but for the zoning ordinance in general, and it fit in that way. And then the negatives are there because they're not like they were before, where it's all bundled together. But it's sounding like other commissioners and Mr. Cato as well were saying that this could be overcome by sort of summary documents or on the website, or basically a better explanation, a better connected dots view of it that would allow the public and the commission and staff to understand how they all fit together and how these aren't just random separate pieces. Is that a good
sort of a roadmap sort of thing?
Yeah, because right now they've been broken apart in a way that they haven't before, and stuck in different sections of the zoning code. And so, if there was some sort of a cheat sheet or a handout or a website set up in a certain way that very quickly the members of the public and new commissioners and those and staff would have a good idea of how it was, or where to find these pieces and why they're separate, and how they fit into the whole of the zoning ordinance. Is that a fair summary of kind of where the discussion is right now?
And if I may, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you got it.
Yes, I agree. If you look at how 22 was formatted altogether, and then the first draft of this in moving it was more, all kind of contained together. So this draft actually has it spread it apart, at least numerically. So the sections aren't consecutive; they're found differently, and so that's where some of the concern is. But when you have to take a look at, and I think I can't remember. I apologize. What Commissioner said in terms of having a table of contents in the beginning, which helped clarify things, was a good suggestion. And looking then at the total picture of Title 30, it does make more sense of why they're not numerically together in the ordinance. And sorry for interrupting, Commissioner Uli. I just added that.
No, that's all good. That's all good. This is Commissioner Drury again. So I have great respect for Ms. Days and Ms. Staley. So I hope that there's can be some sort of a blending of their comments into whether it's a roadmap or a table of content or whatever it is, to make the documents more clear. I think mostly to the casual observer, people that are mildly interested in these documents, as opposed to sort of the nuts and bolts people like the city staff and the design boards. I hope there can be some sort of a joining of the two ideas.
I think it is possible. I don't think it violates any legislative construction rules that a section, I would suggest 30-157-011-011 after purpose would be a short section that would identify all of the other places where a person is going to need to reference definitions or whatever. Because I didn't see at least obvious places where the cross-referencing was really clear within the current expression. So maybe that happens right up front. For definitions, look here, for this, look there, for this, look there. And then that way a person could go gather that stuff up and make their own kind of cheat document, if you will. I don't think that breaks any legislative construction rules.
Okay. Well, thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Drury. And I think it seems like where this discussion has kind of led is we're understanding why the problem is what it is, where we want, and I think maybe our comments will be that we're concerned about this aspect of it, and that we want that to be part of what gets solved, to make it clearer and easier for everyone to understand how it's set up without needing to necessarily change it, but the added piece that needs to happen is somehow to clarify it, and the means in which those get clarified are going to be important. But we're recognizing that there's an issue with this here, and that we want that to be part of the long-term, as this gets solved and as this plays out, part of the solution. Is that a fair assessment, commissioners?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Vice Chair House.
I would offer up that what we've been presented with this third draft is pretty much a complete document, and you just don't have to pay attention to what the numbers are. Everything relevant to HLC review is in here. So if it had a little preamble in the beginning that this represents an excerpt from the Municipal Code Title 30, and this is all the information relevant to Historic Landmarks Commission and historic resources, that could be a separate document on the city's website. So you don't have to wade through all sorts of stuff. Right now, when you go to the Title 30, there's different divisions and chapters within that, and you just don't see it all together in one place. So, this basically is a replacement for 2222. It's just got different numbers on it, which are kind of abstract.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me as well. And with, like you're saying, some sort of a preamble that puts it in context of where these pieces are being pulled from, or the table of contents, or maybe a both and, the table of contents showing the pieces that are highlighted where these are being pulled from, so that someone looking at it can understand how all those pieces, why they're separate pieces and how they fit together, or at least are all the pieces that are involved with historic, as the sort of historic ordinance provision.
Do we start
okay,
in the weeds?
Yeah, it sounds like we've kind of gotten to a pretty good consensus on what we want the problem, or identifying the issue and wanting it to be solved in potentially a couple different ways. Ms. Hernandez, was there anything else that you think we should discuss in the big picture there? All right, in that case,
No, I think that's a really good solution, and I think we'll put that together. The guidelines will have to be revised anyway based on a lot of the content changes. So I think our vision has been, once we get council to adopt the ordinance, we come right after with revised guidelines, both the historic resources design guidelines and the HLC guidelines.
So with respect to those guidelines, if you want to get a little subcommittee of HLC going, then we probably should get that, because that's a good piece of work that's going to take a little while.
I agree. Okay. And when will we need that? When would that be the appropriate time to pull together the subcommittee?
So
when will you guess? We're not holding you to it. If this goes forward to City Council and that all moves.
I would think maybe right after the Planning Commission's review, so we could incorporate any of their comments and make sure we address those as well, and then we can start. Maybe the first of the year, start really convening that subcommittee and outlining the changes. The design guidelines for the historic resources have been drafted. They just need edits. And so to match this ordinance, and then we can look at the other guidelines together.
I'm happy to
Mr. Chair.
happy to serve on that subcommittee.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Great.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Drury?
Yes. Under what time constraint are we operating, if any?
Mr. Hernandez?
I'm just sort of waiting to see what happens at the planning commission, and then we're hoping to go to ordinance committee, but with the holidays coming, I'm sort of guessing we won't be at ordinance committee until January, and then full council.
So we have a little time.
There's not really a deadline, is there? There's nothing driving it other than to get it done.
Right? Yeah, I mean,
Other than the
Okay, yeah,
12
so
years
I-
it's
it
a
took to
goal
get
to
here.
get it done this year. We do not want to lose
Well,
momentum.
Yeah, the
I
fact
guess-
that we've
I
been
guess
working
my
on it
com-
for 40 years is, not really important at this point, I suppose.
It's a planning goal.
Well, I guess my comment would be that anything that that you more organizational types can come up with to make it relieve any obfuscation, to make it very simple and clear in terms of cross-referencing or how the chapters are organized. I think the time would be well spent.
Great.
I see
And
Ms.
Ms.
Zueta.
Sueta. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, and I apologize. I've been trying to speak to you all, but I've had audio issues and I haven't been able to connect. So hopefully I won't get disconnected again, but I just wanted to confirm what Ms. Hernandez has indicated. This is a planning goal. As you know, the ordinance has been in the works for a while, and we've been trying to move it along so that we can, accomplish it in a timely manner, relatively speaking. So, our hope was to have, to get to the planning commission before the end of the year and to ordinance committee and council early next year. And so we're hoping that we can still keep on track with that.
We'll keep our fingers
Great.
crossed for you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So why don't we dive in now? Let's get into the weeds. If we can let's just go page by page, and then kind of review it in a similar way to the way we review, minutes and things like that, where we're just kind of calling out the section, talk it through, have discussion, and try to come to a conclusion on it. And Ms. Hernandez, perhaps as we go through this, you can kind of be on to just kind of chime in on things and just have this sort of discussion about it as we go along. So
I have my
All right.
draft here. I'll go through it with you. We can we'll go through the whole thing.
perfect. Sounds good. And
Can we
then
make it
as
bigger?
well. Sorry, what was that?
Can we make it bigger on the screen?
Go ahead.
Can we zoom in a little more? Yeah. Thank you. Can you? So, and then also we'll try to make sure to for sure discuss the different comments by Mary Louise Days, with the most thorough comments, and then any other comments by commissioners or anyone else that remembers issues that they want to discuss or want to at least note as we go through. So, all right, on page 1. So, sorry, was someone wanting to? Okay, Vice Chair Howe. And sorry, I've got just as a comment, I have a paper copy as well that I've marked up some stuff. So when I'm looking down, you might have to speak up, Vice Chair House, or everyone that's being polite and raising their hand, because I'm going to be looking down a lot. So sorry, just as a point of order.
Do you actually mean, I'm sorry, do you actually mean page 6, which is the beginning of chapter 3157, or page 1, which includes the memo?
I'm looking at page 1 of the third draft.
I'm
The one
looking
that's
at what's
on
up
the
on the
screen?
screen, and sorry, it's numbered with the one at the bottom of it. So sorry, I'm looking at it in terms of the actual printed thing. But we could go through. Do people want to go through the memo at all, or first, or do we want to?
I just want to make sure that we're, so we're going to go through the various parts. This happens to be design review and not the historic resources section per se.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm with you now.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Great. Vice Chair House.
now that we're all on the same page, literally and figuratively,
Yeah.
Mary Louise Day's first comment was about this design review heading. And I understand her concern, but also in the context of how the whole thing has been rearranged and put into different parts of Title 30. I'm fine with it, but I do agree with her that perhaps the title might be revised, because this is not so much about the subject of design review, but about the boards, the entities themselves. Now we have 2 boards, a commission and a committee. So maybe technically design review bodies might be the better title, or maybe just design review boards is fine, and it's understood that that is inclusive of committees and commissions.
I would agree.
think that would be a good change.
I would agree.
That's my only comment on page 1.
I agree as well.
Okay.
Well, that was a big step forward.
Yeah.
You know, the rest of this particular document talks about the authority of the commission itself, which I really don't have any issue with unless we want to increase our scope, authority, and land grabbing potential.
I know you do.
But you know how we keep doing that every time something.
That's right. All the city, the county.
You know, our jurisdiction,
California.
Our jurisdiction would be the boundary of the city of Santa Barbara and all of its territories.
That's right.
They're on 2.
I don't have any issue with this chapter as it's written. It basically tells us who we are and what we do.
Okay, sounds good. So, and let's just stick page by page as we go. Any other page 1 discussion, or people want to bring up things or change any edits? Page 1. All right, let's go to page 2.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner House.
So that would also be Mary Louise Day's second comment is on page 2, and a question about, let's see, whether this 3057-040 was supposed to refer back to a map. That's a question, a general question. I'm assuming there are a lot of places in this revised document that all these will be clickable links in the PDF. Because right now you kind of have to go find these things, and if they're clickable links, that would be good. But you know, there's still the question: where are the links to the detailed map? It's interesting, Nicole, the email that you sent to Mary Lou, and I think she forwarded to me, where you gave a link to those maps. It was a dead link. So.
Darn. Technology failed us.
That is, I think it's supposed to be as defined in the section that didn't get changed, but to the section that that has the full description of the district in the overlay zone, the L landmark district, LD, and HD historic district. So I need to just change the reference. 30.57.
Would this be a good place to insert a link to the map, so that if somebody says, okay, where is EPV? There's a link right there.
Okay.
I don't know.
And that's something that would happen at the end, because that's when everything would be posted.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Right. Is that right, John?
Well, just a question. We wouldn't be putting the link in the ordinance. Is that, because links could change, it's more of the ordinance is a legal document. So we have at least,
you're right.
So what we have in the ordinance is the reference to a 4.0, which is a legal description of the boundaries of that district. I do, or if it's an actual map that we place in there. But in this case, we did the boundaries, but we wouldn't want to put a link because, that could change any moment's time. And so, and you need it for enforceability in an ordinance too, and everything else. And so that could cause,
Well, there needs to be a balance between those concerns and convenience for the user, because so far I don't know how you find the city's online map that has parcel by parcel delineation of EPV, and presumably that's not going to change. So maybe that is something that can be a link in the PDF version of this that you find online. Needs to be made easy somehow.
So
Do you
let
want
me
to
just
use
ask
the
that.
city map?
that
The city maps, you can have EPV highlighted. I do it almost all the time, in all the districts.
So let me just ask, so is it that we can have a both and, where we can have, we're going to have legal description. What I'm hearing is that it's going to be legally described, so and a reference to that in this section. Was that correct? It's going to be like reference to where the legal description of EPV is, and then could we also have that be a link as well, so that when it's digital, it's a connected thing?
John, John, they took out the legal descriptions in this draft.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
You want
Sorry,
them
sorry,
back
sorry.
in?
It would be better to have the legal description. If that's the concern, it would be better to have the legal description in. You know, my
I'll put 'em
thought
back
is,
in.
yeah, my thought is it'd be easier to compromise is to have a legal description in, and then on the reference sheet that we could always have on, like, for example, the HLC website, I think is a good place to permanently always have this. You know, links can be put on that to help users too, and to refer that to. It's just, or a map, but to put links in an ordinance because it's a legal document. And so, it could be presented in court. Let's say there's some issue, everything else. That's the danger of where links come in, not to really try to have that. I caution strongly not to put inside the ordinance, but anything outside to help users with, absolutely we can do.
Yeah, and I think we internally also discussed putting the maps. We could put it with this handout, all our maps of our resources.
Definitely.
At the end of
Yeah.
Okay. So is our conclusion for this? It's sounding like, well, I don't want to put words in everyone's mouth, but it sounds like it's going towards legal description within the ordinance, and then with all the peripheral materials, the cheat sheets and the online website and all that, having a link to the map that is at least good and visual for everyone to look at, but actually the ordinance itself just stick with legal description and be good with that. Because the other option I'm hearing is to put a map in here as well. But I mean, I think those are our two options, but
Mr.
not a
Chair.
link, but just a map. Yes, Commissioner House.
noted on the zoning map. I think
For further
that's part of-
clarification, what I'm understanding is that, if you put a map in the actual legal ordinance, it's too small for anybody to really read and figure out, what parcel is in or out. So you would need to put back in the meets and bounds descriptions that we had and that were taken out in order.
We just said we're going to do that.
Okay, that's what I want to
Okay,
clarify.
that sounds good. So that way no one can use them because no one will, and then they'll have to go find the link. That's perfect. Okay, so that sounds like where we're landing. Is anyone disagreeing with that? Everyone good with? Okay. All right. On to the next. Anything else on page 2?
Mr. Chair, I think perhaps too, or perhaps also, Mary Louise Day's comments, she had a second one about page 2, and that has to do with HLC jurisdiction on the airport property. And as I was mentioning earlier, HLC did have an involvement in the new terminal, but I think it was a joint ABR HLC committee. So I just wanted to clarify that HLC never has had purview over the airport property except a landmark building on it, the old terminal.
Right. We have the old terminal as well as the hangars that are on the potentials list that are
Okay.
eligible for the National Register. The clarification was that because the property is so huge, would the whole entire airport property be under HLC jurisdiction? Because our ordinance says that if there's a historic resource on a lot, it's all under your jurisdiction, but there's so much of the airport that isn't really relevant to historic resources and more just utilitarian.
Well, if I may add two other things to ease the issue too, is don't forget the airport is publicly owned land. And so you're dealing with a lot of times private property. So it's actually, you know, obviously the jurisdiction and control of the city. And as you said, a lot of these are done through, with the terminal and everything else, done through joint meetings of obviously getting every board's respective opinion on those issues. So that's why it wouldn't be in the purview because of it being, you know, publicly owned property and land. Then you also have to worry about FAA issues too and everything else. So.
And we can clarify that historic resources are under your jurisdiction and will remain so. It's just way bigger than any other typical law.
My general recollection about matters like this, a historic resource on a very large piece of property, is that an imaginary property line is drawn around the historic resource at 5 feet from its perimeter for purposes of reviewing that particular thing and not involving the entire parcel. I think the National Park Service has some kind of guidance or technical document when it comes to historic resources on national parks, as an example.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, it's just.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Mahan.
I was chair of that committee that reviewed the new airport. The existing airport was a landmark, and we knew that it had to be moved, and we knew that it was going to be in some way, it was going to be a part of the new airport. And that's one of the reasons the Historic Landmarks Commission got involved in it. But the whole committee was set up by City Council, and City Council decided that the ABR and the Historic Landmarks Commission would work together on the airport and the renovation of the historic airport, the new airport, and the renovation of the historic airport, and how it would be integrated into the plan. That's how it all happened.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So, and just for final clarification, so there isn't. That's not the only reason it was. The airport itself would be involved. That we'd be involved with it is that it's only the historic portion, and that is under our purview, and all the rest is not. And with the potential of the hangars as well, as you mentioned.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Just because, but it's been always a little confusing because the ordinance says any lot that has a historic resource on it. So we just wanted to clarify that one. We don't want to do it too many times because also then it like doubles the amount of design reviews for someone. So if we split design review on a smaller lot, they're going to ABR for one question and you for another question. And usually if we keep it all in your jurisdiction, we have some consistency because you all can reference the resource. So the airport was just such a massive exception.
So our rule is you have to have at least a mile long lot before you get to. Okay. Any other discussion or questions or comments on page 2? Is everyone good with that? With the explanation of the airport?
Yeah, but I am growing concerned that we have a lot of pages to review, and this.
I agree.
Now, because we could be at this quite some time if we're going word for word.
Yeah.
We
went into the microscope, the weeds under the microscope. We'll pull back out. We'll go through the weeds, but move quickly. All right. So,
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner House.
If it helps, my next comments are on page 7, so we're jumping several.
All right. Well, we'll keep moving through. I think we'll be okay as long as we keep moving. So, well, on to page 3. Any page 3 discussion? All right. Hearing none, we'll go on to page 4. Any page 4 discussion? On to page 5. Page 5 discussion. Okay, I actually had one note here. I'm just going to double check what it was. I don't know if it needs to be discussed. Yeah, no, it doesn't need to be discussed. It was just a note of liking something extra on the project compatibility discussion. Okay, page 6.
I just want to reiterate my suggestion that we add 30.157.011 references.
Okay,
Yes, that was a good point.
0.1.30.
got it.
Okay, and any is everyone in agreement with that as well? Any discussion about that?
Wait,
But yeah. Sorry.
Chair.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner-
how many
Commissioner
ones
Drew.
and zeros is Commissioner Uli's suggestion?
0.011.
Thank you.
11. So there's 10, 11.
Actually, if I may, it would be 1.5. So that would be
There you go. I'll let the lawyers and the numbers.
There it is.
The mayor.
Thank you for that clarification. I was running out of zeros and ones there.
Got it.
All right.
1.5. Okay.
All right. Okay.
Oh, I see what you got
page-
going on there. You got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. I got it. All right. I'm with you now.
All right. Anything else on page 6 or anything on page 6? Okay. All right. We're on to page 7. Look how fast we went, Commissioner Uli. You thought we were going slow.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. I just want to chime in. I know Commissioner House has a list of things he's working through, but I just wanted to chime in. I agree with the 5 significance criteria. I think it's much better than 11, and it is personalized from the 4 national ones to add the 5th one. So I agree with them all.
Great. Thank you.
You too.
And actually along that line, just for, and most of them, not all of you know this, but just so it's said as well, it does, because it aligns with it and allows us to sort of run up the ladder easily and succinctly, a report that works for us that also can go to state. I think that there's potential for a good impact for those that need to be protected on the state level as well, that might have taken a longer route as state laws progress very quickly. So I think it's a good thing on that level as well. All right, on Commissioner House, the page 7 comment?
Yes. So Mary Lou brings up the point at the top of the page. There's a reference says, in accordance with the criteria established by California Public Resources Code section 5024.1. And I know the answer to the question, will this be a link, which is a no, but I have no idea what that is and how relevant that is, and if it's something I need to search out in order to find out why it's in there. So I'd appreciate some explanation of that.
I believe that's a reference to CEQA.
I think
And
so
a section
too.
106, and a section 106.
Well, if you don't know, I'm sure I don't.
Ms. Hernandez, do you have
think
enlighten?
I think it's a remnant from the existing ordinance. I think it's in what we have now. We don't have to reference it anymore. We can just say in accordance with our own criteria and our definitions of a historic resource.
That might be the better thing if you can take it out, or if you can add some clarifying language, whatever needs to be done.
I think we have a really strong definition of historic resources that covers a lot. So I think we can do that. Probably more than.
All right.
Mr. Chair.
So would you suggest?
sorry.
So would you suggest that the sentence be with the criteria, and then we quote section 30.157.025 and strike by California Public Resources Code section 5024.1?
I think so. I want to just double check that reference. I haven't had a chance to yet, just making sure that we don't need it. Just in case, we want to make sure we can cover it verbally instead of referencing someone else's code, like I said, in case it changes.
Right.
So I'll double check it and I can get back to you and just let you know the conclusion.
I mean, if there is something
Great,
in California Environmental Quality Act that has to be quoted, because that's what that public resources code is CEQA.
Right. I think, and my thought would be the only one thing that it covers, I think we tried to cover all resources that CEQA covers, but I'm going to double check it just in case.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Commissioners, we did cover CEQA and in terms of not specific references, but basically, referring to our CEQA guidelines and our ordinance already have in place. So we'll double check on that report, like Nicole said.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, and is everyone in agreement that as long as it can be removed in terms of the reference to CEQA, as long as we're covered internally with the city's document, then we're good with that. Is that a general consensus?
I'm comfortable with it. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Great. All right. Sounds good. Next on your list, Mr. House.
Next on my list would also be on page 7. There's a reference to, let's see, let me get this out here. Page 7. Where was that? Well, Mary Louise Day's comment was there's a reference to section 30.157.040, but there is no such section in the draft. There's an 050 and an 030, I think.
We'll correct that. It was just an oversight.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, Mr. Chair, my comment on this page is paragraph 30. The last sentence suggests that structures of merit are recommended to City Council, and I don't believe that is the case. Landmarks are recommended to City Council, and structures of merit are designated by HLC.
Correct. I think that was just.
Yes, and Vice Chair House.
My suggestion for that would be to just strike for recommendation to City Council. So it just may be proposed to the Commission, Historic Landmarks Commission, for designation as a landmark or structure of merit.
I would agree.
Paragraph E underneath that makes it clear what happens to a structure of merit and what happens to a landmark, where they go and how they're designated.
I agree with that.
Yeah. I agree too.
Okay. All right. Any disagreement? All right. Great. Any more page 7 question, comments, discussion? All right, on page 8. Okay.
I don't have any comments on 8.
Anyone else?
How did our eagle eye Miss Days chime in?
Actually, I think there's something more on page 7. She, she took issue with the wording, if the HLC recommends the designation as a structure of merit, but she says the commission designates it, does not recommend. But I think as read in the draft, it still makes sense. We recommend and we designate. So I don't think that needs a correction.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my next comment would be on page 12.
Awesome.
Okay. And let's see if there's, let's just keep marching through in case there's something between there. We'll go fast. Page 8, didn't hear anything for page 8. Page 9, anything for page 9? I didn't have anything. Page 10. All right, nothing page 10. Page 11. Page 11. All right, on to page 12. Page 12.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner, Vice Chair House.
Mary Louise Days's concern was that according to this draft, minor exterior alterations don't need to come to the HLC, which she believes the HLC needs to see any change, any alteration to a landmark. But it is my understanding that these kind of minor exterior alterations can be handled ministerially. Is that correct, Nicole?
Yes, we define them more in the definitions, but they're very simple. So I don't want to send a landmark here to you because they're changing windows to match the existing, or repairing stucco, or doing things that clearly are in the purview and meet the Secretary of Interior standards for preservation. When they become big and you're going to have a visual change, that's when we will send it here. And they're only approved by me or somebody with my qualifications in historic preservation. And they'll be issued a certificate of appropriateness. So it won't just be a staff member at the counter.
Right. Well, I have a proposed change to the text. So it says minor exterior alterations is defined in chapter yada yada to a historic resource may only be approved by the city's architectural historian if it is found that. So it's making it clear it's approved by you.
Great.
So I don't want to jump out and go look at the definition of minor exterior alterations, but could you characterize them? If someone is, in your example, Ms. Hernandez, if someone is replacing one or two windows in a landmark building, I would see that as a minor thing. But if they're replacing all of the windows and openings in a landmark, I would not see that as a minor exterior alteration. Even if they are matching what the existing is, it's still, in my view, that would be a major thing.
Yeah, we defined it as in-kind repair and replacement that matches the existing in size, profile, exposure, detail, relief, and dimension. Restoration projects that return elements of a historic resource to its original condition, or color changes appropriate for the style of the building or meet our Stellar's color guide. So it does kind of set it out. They're pretty minor.
But I suppose one could replace all of the windows in their landmark fitting that description, and it would still be fall under the definition of minor exterior alterations. But to me, that doesn't sound like a minor alteration.
And what? And just to hear what you have to say behind that, why not? If they're exactly matching what's existing and historic, and they're all rotten, or
I get what you're saying. I suppose that's where the certificate of compatibility or substantial, whatever the city's architectural historian is going to determine based on submission by the applicant to replace all of their windows. And if that professional determines that it meets this criteria, then I suppose I'm okay with it. But it certainly would be alarming to drive by a building and see that all the windows are being replaced, and we wonder, what's going on there?
Right, and I think that's one of the Secretary of Interior standards is to preserve rather than replace. I know when I look at windows, and since we're talking about, I usually ask for some major evidence that they warrant replacement, because the old growth wood and all the other issues of how wonderful these materials are, and not to be short-sighted in removing them. I think lots of times if I won't sign off on something, that's when we go to the commission, because I'm pretty conservative when I approve things, because
unless the termites have eaten all the wood and there's only paint left, then obviously you got to replace them all. But that's generally not
putting that burden on the
I think that brings but that does bring up a bigger question as well, in my mind, because I know, knowing you and how you've operated with those things, that's great. But do we have guidelines in place that not necessarily in the ordinance, but is it clear? So for example, in 10 years, if everyone is different, right? Different staff, different HLC, different everything, how does this play out? And how are we ensuring that that we're getting that quality of restoration as opposed to, you know, a heavier form of replacement and
Right.
you know, so is there a way that is there because
The historic resource design guidelines that we drafted has a huge chapter on windows, and it's pretty, and we can look at those in our committee before we go for official adoption, because they're supposed to be the companion piece to this, but they go through material by material recommendations, and lots of things would be, if they don't meet those guidelines, they go to the commission. They're, you know, they even detail like proof of deteriorated windows, not just saying they're deteriorated. And so we have those in draft form on our website to reference if you want to look at them again, but it's going into really deep detail of guidelines on how to restore each material on a historic resource.
I mean, we don't need we don't need the autopsy on the termites to determine if the wood they chopped. I think that's getting a little much. Sounds like our attorney wants to chime in here.
I just want one moment just to help. Yes, Chair Gumbine, and commissioners, you know, in terms of ordinance drafting too, you want to be as specific as possible in other such situations where if you're very specific, you end up you know, hurting the intent what you're trying to do. So windows, it's a good point, right? Maybe one window is considered a minor alteration. Obviously, all of them probably wouldn't. So when you look at our resources for any for anyone in Nicole's position, which is defined in the ordinance, that acts as a gatekeeper. So it's a very unusual thing in our ordinance in terms of this ordinance has actually a position that is a gatekeeper in terms of studying and understanding what alterations we would consider minor or not minor when it comes to historic resources. And then also the tools and guidelines that are in place. So the way it's written, at least it basically says, yes, you know, minor alterations can be done, but they need the approval of that gatekeeper, that position. And then that's what's decided. So it'll go on perpetuity beyond this board and beyond positions there. And that flexibility allows to make sure any historic resources are not disturbed. And that's how it's written in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Durant.
I don't want to belabor it. I just wanted to highlight this particular thing because my sense of that definition is that I wouldn't say that was minor. One or two I'd say minor, but all of them I would say was not minor.
Okay, so are we in at least a good enough point for right now for moving on with the ordinance and
Yes.
For this on this portion? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other page 12 issues discussion?
You won't
All
hear
right.
from me again until page 21.
All right. Well, we'll see if we can zip over there. All right. Okay, so page 13, any questions or discussion? I had one note here, but it might just be that I wasn't, the terminology I just wasn't understanding, but I wanted to bring it up, and if if the legalese make sense, then it makes sense, and I just wasn't getting it. But so item 5, the bottom of C, so it's saying preservation of the historic resource is not economically feasible, or architect qualified in historic preservation at the very bottom sufficient to warrant demolition, and then it goes on to D, a compelling public interest justifies demolition. And I'm not sure if I'm not understanding, is it C and D, or is it just A, B, C, and D are all, because it says at the top, demolition of historic resource other than landmarks, or a proposal to demolish, is that 5, top 5, a historic resource other than a landmark may only be approved if the historic landmarks has made at least one of the following findings. And
So it should
so
be
if it's at least
instead of an and.
or,
Yeah.
yeah, and I wasn't sure if I was missing
Mr.
something
Doimas,
there.
where are you?
I am here.
Yeah.
I am here.
All right. So
So
what,
number 5, just to say, proposal to demolish historic resource other than a landmark may only be approved if the structure has made at least one of the following findings. So the way it's written is one of these findings out of A, B, C, D have to be made. But I'm confused as where do you want the or? Where
The last word of C is an and it
Oh,
should
let me
be an
see.
or.
Thank you. Yes, it should be an or. Correct. You're 100%
all right.
We don't miss
Well,
a thing.
You know, you're right.
And under
Okay.
under definitions in 300, it would be for W, and that is getting into the weeds.
Yeah.
This is the definition.
I
of
wonder
Very
when
good.
that was coming up.
I'll wait.
All right. So now that we're in the weeds, 13. Okay. Any other 13? Well, I was just trying to understand it. Okay.
No,
Just a catch.
I didn't.
All
I
right,
didn't think that we could have so much fun with an ordinance.
Yeah.
Where's the fun commission? All right. Page 14. Anything on page 14?
As a general comment on the Mills Act section, I did appreciate having the detail about the act in here and how we're going to implement that program. So it's very helpful, I think.
Yep. Sounds good. I agree. So 14, anything? 15, anything? Page 15. Page 16. And I did have one thing on 16 at the top. So it starts on the end of page 15, actually. 3A, Roman numeral 4, the very bottom. Property visible from the street. And it says the real property owner will expressly agree and the plan shall provide that any fencing or landscaping along the public right-of-way footage of the real property will be placed such that it allows the home or building to be visible to the public from the public right-of-way. And I just wanted to make sure that it would say, if there's a thing that might be added to say, like, if applicable, like, you know, in other words, if there's a property that's just not visible from the public right-of-way, you know, if that we're not, like, you know, insisting on something, or if there's some way of kind of distinguishing that. Obviously, most of the property is pretty obvious. Don't build a big fence. But if there is something that's a glimpse from very far away up on a hill, and insisting that the smallest thing isn't put in the way to block the smallest minor view, or, you know, some flexibility there, or if it's not possible, period.
So in my opinion, I think it's covered in the title, property is visible from the street. So if the property is not visible from the street, then this section doesn't apply to it.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay, good point. Okay. Okay. That's a
You
good
guys
point.
are sharp.
I take it back. I did catch the and, though.
I didn't catch the end either.
I didn't catch the title on this one, but I got the end.
You were in the
I know
weeds.
some of the properties do have some fencing that's been there since it was built or hedging, but they try and keep it so that it's still a public benefit, and I work with them on that.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And then the other one I had on this was the very bottom of 16 on the cancellation fee. So it says the contract may also provide that if the city cancels the contract for any of these reasons, the owner shall pay the state of California cancellation fee of 12.5% of the full value of the property at the time of cancellation, as determined by the county assessor, without regard to any restriction on the property imposed by the historic property contract. Now, I don't know what the California rules are for this, and if this is what we're stuck with no matter what. But just wanted to make sure that it couldn't be like an up to 12.5% or something like that, where it wasn't like automatically, if there was some sort of a default on something, that automatically this giant hammer came down. Because I think that if no matter what, you can't, if it's 12.5% of your property value that's going to be gone, it's going to, and there might be, a reason or a reasonable reason to, it might be harder to convince people that the Mills Act is a really good thing to do if the automatic the full sort of force of the law comes down, if there's in any way a non going with your with the breaking the deal. For example, some of the Mills Acts are $50,000 worth of work or $100,000 worth of work or something like that, and if the property value is many times that the 12.5% would just not be worth it to take the gamble that something goes wrong and they aren't able to fulfill their portion or the contract is canceled. So that was one issue I wanted to kind of bring up as to, is this a California imposed thing, forced, or is there flexibility, or is there an up to thing that we can put to it? Or
I think it's certainly worth exploring. I've always had a problem with this particular aspect of the Mills Act. I could see where if the owner cancels the contract, I could see that there should be a penalty. If the city cancels the contract, then the city should pay the penalty, not the property owner. But I don't believe that's how the Mills Act provisions are written. They're always one-sided in favor of the government. So I don't think there's much we can do about it, but I've never liked this part of it.
But Commissioner Uli, this is actually saying that it would be if the owner has breached the contract. Not, it's not like the city would just come in and cancel the contract and then the owner would have to pay a cancellation fee. It would be that the owner has breached the contract for one of these, represented reasons.
The contract may also provide that if the city cancels the contract for any of the reasons, okay, well, all right. You got me on that one, I suppose. I still never liked it.
It does seem draconian, and it would make more sense for the penalty to be proportional to the degree of the breach. Mr. Doimus?
Yeah, I will look into that if it's state law. I know multiple jurisdictions, probably I can count 15, 20, all have that 12.5%. So my assumption would be that that could be state law to do that if they all have that amount. I'll double check, but I'm pretty certain it's state law that imposes that exact amount under those conditions.
Okay, and then I guess the question, or sort of the general feeling that I would want to send with that comment of looking into it is just to seeing if there can be a way that things can be what's it called, tailored or adjustable in any way, or if that's absolutely unmovable by the state law regulations. And if other commissioners feel similarly, then I think that would be the sort of general direction.
And I've got a general issue with contracts for any of these reasons. It doesn't. Okay, so you follow through the English, right? But it seems to me it should be specific for the reasons outlined in this chapter, for the reasons outlined in sections A, B, C, and D, for the reasons of 1, 2, 3. There should be a specific reference and not just left kind of hanging in the wind there.
1, 2, and 3, or 1, 2, or 3?
That's good comedy. That is very good comedy. Very good tie back.
All right. So if everyone's in agreement with that, those comments about this, if that could be part of the, if possible, rework in these ways, I think those all seem like reasonable to me. If others agree, then we can send that on as part of our direction. All right. Okay, so anything else from 16? All right, let's go on to 17. Page 17, anyone? Okay.
Do you guys have any comments on 17?
Nope, not till 21.
All right.
All right. 17, 18, page 18, any page 18? We've gotten to very boring stuff on page 18. All right, page 19. Any page 19 stuff? All the penalties. And no one better have anything on page 20 because it's so small. All right. We're good with page 20? All right, on to 21. Okay.
Mr. Chair, Mary Lou had a concern about the deletion of the legal descriptions of EPV, but it is my understanding that those are being restored. So that's not an issue any longer. And then she also had a concern that the words Hispanic architecture had been removed from Santa Barbara's renowned tradition. I know we had a discussion about this at the last meeting, and I'm guessing it's because Italian Mediterranean got included, and that's not a Hispanic style. Is that a correct understanding?
It says, continue and perpetuate the Santa Barbara's renowned tradition, use California adobe, Mission Revival, Spanish Colonial Revival, and Italian Mediterranean, and subsets of those styles of architecture.
And I think she's saying that the previous ordinance said Santa Barbara's Hispanic renowned tradition of Hispanic architecture, and the words Hispanic architecture have been eliminated. But I'm guessing that's because Italian Mediterranean got included.
Yeah, we tried to be more specific to actual styles that are in our style guide so that people can reference an actual style guide of specific styles we use.
Was Italian Mediterranean in the previous ordinance?
I think we added that because it is downtown and it is in our style guide, and it is one of the popular styles in our downtown.
And I would also add that I believe there was some language, I'm not sure if it was an ordinance, but I think it was, referencing Mediterranean architecture, our historic Mediterranean architecture. And it was just less general, I think, but.
We're trying to make it so it's specific to architectural styles that we can reference in textbooks rather than a culture that. The name of the Hispanic is not really used anymore. It's called Latinx community, and that encompasses a lot of communities that don't have references in architecture in California too, like maybe some Puerto Rican architecture. So we were trying to be more specific to more academic language of styles that we have examples of in our style guide. We also reference there's so many subtypes of the Spanish Colonial Revival that we even use, like Churrigueresque and Plateresque and the Monterey. So that's why we added subsets of those styles. But if there are more terms we want to use, I think it's good to use the architectural academic terms. So as we move forward, it's not confused with a cultural term.
And manual lean, let's not forget manual lean.
Exactly.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Drury.
So this is strictly for El Pueblo Viejo, and we don't have to include Queen Anne's and Victorians and California bungalows and all those other styles that are sort of around actually in design districts, but this is specific to the core of El Pueblo Viejo.
That would be the title, sir.
Yes.
I understand the title is the El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District.
Mm-hmm. That's what it is. And
thank you.
And so if you're a historic building noted for that style, you can retain that style per our ordinance. But if you are not a historic building and don't have one of these styles, you need to, what replaces the building or major alterations need to go toward that style.
You need to get one of those styles and do it quick.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
All right.
other commissioners' comments on it, on what we currently have as the draft? In my opinion, I think that by listening to styles and then also having the subsets of those styles of architecture, I think we're covering all the periods pretty well, not necessarily exhaustively, but pretty well and pretty strong with strong language. So I think we're getting at the core of the Hispanic architecture, but also keeping in the Italian Mediterranean as well. So I think I think it covers all the bases in a way that can't be confused going forward as well. So
I agree.
I do.
I agree.
I think I'm comfortable with it. Okay, great.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Mahan.
What about Monterey style? Monterey style. I mean, there's a building on Carrillo Street that I can't think of the name of it now. Next to the Adobe, it's a Monterey style. Dr. Gebhardt said that Monterey style actually was first done in Santa Barbara rather than in Monterey.
Yeah, I know. I picked a fight on that one.
I thought that was included in the previous ordinance, the old ordinance.
It was. It was. I don't believe in the previous ordinance, Mission Revival was not included. It was Spanish Colonial Revival, Monterey, and Adobe. Those were the three styles in the original. But I think we should. I think we should put Monterey in, and I question exactly what is Italian Mediterranean. I'm not sure exactly what that. What is that?
So
we have it in our style guide. We can send it to you.
Is that?
Yeah, and the argument is that, so example wise, that the Masonic Temple, sort of the Renaissance version of that, and then we give some more examples. The Hodges Estate. It's basically the blend that was happening of the teens and 20s, where it's looking at larger. The Mediterranean is sort of a mix and match larger, and those that steer towards the Italian version of it as opposed to the Spanish, and especially pre-1920s before it got really strong into the sort of Santa Barbara locked it towards the Spanish. So that's what it's trying to catch, and we don't have a lot of examples, but we do have enough. We do have enough, and we do because they weren't as popular elsewhere as LA or other areas. So that's the argument, is that. And that there was language about Mediterranean, not just Hispanic architecture. That's part of the argument of our historic historic past and our roots. So that's why the Italian Mediterranean is being added in, and it ties to one of the styles that were identified and discussed in the style guide. So for Santa Barbara in particular.
I think Monterey style should be included.
I agree.
I like that idea, and I do
agree.
think that is a blind spot in the empty. Yeah, it's unique enough that considering a subset of Spanish Colonial Revival would be, I think, a mistake. So
great.
And we don't have it in our style guide, I don't think, do we? But that was identified as one of our next to dos after the whatever 13 or 14 that we have right now. So.
And Mr. Chair,
this will force us to do it fast.
Yeah, and we invoke that when we give some guidance to projects that come before us. We invoke that style. So
yeah, for sure, and it's definitely very relevant here, and we definitely have plenty of examples and versions that blend Monterey with Spanish Colonial Revival as well, but have enough distinctive characteristics that are very much Monterey that I think it makes total sense as well. So, okay, it seems like everyone's in pretty consensus on adding the Monterey.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay, I'll have a scoop of Monterey with that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Before Monterey.
What kind of sauce you want?
With dark chocolate.
All right. Anything else? Page 21. All right. Let's go on to page 22. All right, any comments on page 22? right. On to page 23. All right, no page 23, page 24. Anything page 24? All right, on to page 25. All right, page 26, anything? All right, and everyone good on the buffer zone stuff now, buffer area on page 26, 4, item 4, top, towards the top. All right. Okay, on to page 27. I think page 27.
Going once, going twice.
All right, page 28. Sold to page 28. We're getting close to the end. This is your chance to, any other chance for final words on the ordinance. All right, page 29. No.
Definition.
Into the weeds. Get ready to add it. Weed. All right, on page 30.
Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair House.
This is the only one I didn't get to before the meeting started. She says on page 30, the definition of historic resource does not make sense in the second line. The criteria are in 30-157-025 and not 030E, and the next few words do not make sense in the context. So I did not get time to read that over and over and figure out what her concern was.
Okay.
You mean the sentence itself does not make sense that opens up that subheading?
That's apparently what she's saying. In the second line, designated historically significant based on the criteria in the chapter. I guess it's a criteria.
Maybe it's just a misquote in the
So the
she's saying they're in 025, not 030.
The criteria section is misquoted.
So,
So we can correct that.
Yeah.
Is she correct about that?
Yes, she is.
Yes, she is.
Okay.
Be 25 and not 30.
Yeah, it might
Okay.
have just gotten switched when we did the formatting changes. So that's great. We'll change that. And then the historic resources may include, but are not limited to the list below. And that's where we really encompass almost everything that CEQA does, and we'll double check that.
Okay.
Which is what started our conversation earlier because I think we tried to include everything.
Okay.
Could we, excuse me, could we just parse that opening sentence one more time? It seems to run on a bit. So everything is coherent up to eligible to be designated historically significant based on the criteria in chapters 25, right?
Yeah. Period. Maybe it should be a period.
25, or historic resources may also include, grammatically that doesn't work.
I agree. I think it should just be a period. New sentence.
Yes.
Historic resources may include, but not limited
Yeah,
to.
so
That's what I think.
take the or out, right?
Yeah,
Right.
and then start a new sentence with historic resources.
Yeah. Period.
You can use that
after,
or in the earlier page instead of the and.
We've got a
You take that
leftover or now.
Yeah, we got an extra one.
Okay, so yeah, we'll keep that, or we can keep that kind of aside and use it as needed later on.
We can sell it.
Or sell it. Yeah. Or it doesn't come cheap.
Yeah.
I
Right.
believe that.
So are we correct to say a period after the capital E and then capital H, historic resources, so on? Yes?
Yeah, but
Yes.
that
Still
yes,
applies.
that number is going to swap out. Yeah.
Yeah, the reference.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Anything else for page 30? All right, on to 31. Okay, nothing for 31. On to page 32. This is your last chance. unless you really hate blank pages, which is 33.
Well, I have a
It
lot of
doesn't even-
comments. I have a lot of comments on page 33.
You should have like not left intentionally blank written on it. Is that what, is that our edit? All right.
I'm drawing a
Nothing on
blank.
third-
That's the most coherent statement I've seen all afternoon.
There we go.
I
We're good.
really
Okay, so if there's no
appreciate
more
the
on
time.
32,
Thank you, guys.
yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
and the detail that you have
So,
put into
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion
Yes,
that
Mr.
we recommend the draft as commented and noted that we just did to the Planning Commission and City Council.
I'll second
Second.
that.
And Mr. Chair, under
All right.
discussion,
Commissioner Edmonds for the second, and then under discussion.
perhaps we
Mr.
could
House?
add with boundless appreciation to staff and the
Yeah.
commissioners and to the public who contributed comments on this
Yes.
effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really appreciate the
Does the,
public.
does the maker of the motion and the second agree that?
I totally agree with the boundless effort.
Yep.
All right,
Well,
sounds good. Any other
right when
discussion?
this is done, we can go back to designating mounds of structures of merit.
Oh, yes.
Oh, goody.
Oh, yeah.
goody.
I think we might like ordinances better.
I've missed
Ah,
those.
If you
golly.
put like ordinances and then dental work and then math designations in that order.
Oh,
I also, just a general comment, I also appreciate the fact that, that as it worked out, this was the only thing on the agenda so that we had enough time to feel comfortable to work through all of this. You know, it's important to get done, important to get done right and well.
Yep. I think we could
Yep,
thank Ms.
I-
Plummer.
Yes,
Yep,
we
thank
can.
you very much. Yeah. And now then next week, we're gonna be wishing, you know, with the 45 items that we got, or in 2 weeks. We're gonna sing a different tune.
Oh,
But for
my.
now, all right, so with that, if there's any more discussion before we, additions, all right, so let's do a roll call and vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin the roll call vote. We'll start with Vice Chair House.
Yes, emphatically.
Oh, sorry, can I cut in for a second? Could we use, since this is an ordinance, could we use our proper Old English for the voting? Thank you.
Aye. Is that the word? Okay, aye.
Commissioner Mahan,
Yes.
Oh,
Commissioner Edmonds,
Aye.
Commissioner Uli,
aye.
Commissioner Drury,
Aye.
Chair Grumbine.
Aye. All right.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
And I
Well,
know,
it's almost unanimous, but yeah, Commissioner Mahan used yes, so.
and I note in the comment, as some of you might see there, our liaison to the council congratulates us for our efforts. So we appreciate being acknowledged for our effort.
Yes,
Oh,
indeed.
Great.
Mr. Chair, I'll
you
change
very
my
much.
vote. I'll change my vote to aye.
Oh,
Oh, there it is. All right, we got it.
Pressuring him into conformance.
Hey, whatever works. Great. All right, so we have a unanimous vote. Thank you, everyone, for all of your time and effort on this, and especially to staff, yeah, and to council and to everyone. So,
And happy Veterans
all
Day.
right. Yes, and happy Veterans Day.
yes, indeed.
Right.
Impressive day.
All right, great. So with that, we will close our meeting. Thank you.
See you all in 2.
Adjourned.
See you.